Hello everyone, and thank you again for joining me in this new episode of Star Trek: The Original Series. So, I had promised that today was going to be a review video. Now, the reaction videos go to my Patreon page. The ones that were not voted here are exclusive there. Now, here's the problem, and I really hope my patrons can understand what happened here. So I was recording my reaction video. I took over an hour filming between pauses and whatnot, and then when I was about to start editing the video, I realized that there was absolutely no sound. And the only culprit I can figure out in this case is the microphone. So I checked everything on the microphone. Everything was connected as it was supposed to be, but there was simply no sound on the video, and therefore the reaction is gone. This is the thing that really pisses me off, that I would have to do another reaction video, but there wouldn't be any real reaction in it, and so the video is basically spoiled. So what I will do for my patrons in regards to that there's no reaction video for this specific episode, I will re-edit my Gojira video, and it's going to be exclusive only for Patreon in the time being. Okay, so this episode had 2 votes in the original list, so it didn't make the cut straight to YouTube. So I have to say, it was a very interesting episode in my opinion. I was really into it. I think there have been other episodes that have really got me into the boring area, but this one was actually kind of intriguing. But once again, let's make a quick recap of this episode. This episode is particularly interesting because not even 30 seconds in the episode we get the first mention of a very famous race.
Negotiations with the Klingon Empire on the verge of breaking down. Starfleet Command anticipates a surprise attack.
But we don't get to fully recover from surprise because not even 1 minute in the episode and we learn about Organia and the Organians.
Inhabited by humanoids, very peaceful, friendly people. Living on a primitive level, little of intrinsic value, approximately class D- on Richter's scale of cultures.
And not even 90 seconds into the episode when suddenly...
Body approaching. Configurations.
The Enterprise is attacked by a Klingon ship. They retaliate, and after a few back and forths, the Klingon ship apparently is destroyed. They decide to go to Organia and try to negotiate with the Organians before the Klingons get there. So this episode has a very important element that makes it unique, and this is the Klingons, the first appearance of them. So obviously when I first heard the Klingons, I was like, what? And then it was like, oh man, it's actually a very important appearance. It's not just a mention. And yes, it gives us a very close view of this race, which is already famous, even though I haven't seen anything from, I have seen the first season of the original series, but I am not a Trekkie, or I'm not like that versed on Star Trek culture, but everyone knows about the Klingons. Okay, so having to see the first image we get about them and a real close-up to their personalities, you know, this warrior, very sort of aggressive but also very honest kind of adversary. So we know that they are at war. They do not like anyone from the Federation. This brings a big problem to our characters, and the Organians, who happen to be the third party in this episode, that at first they seem to be the least important race in this case, and apparently they had a huge surprise for all of us at the end. Kirk and Spock are beamed down to Organia, where apparently no Organian cares at all about their presence. They are promptly welcomed by an Organian. Kirk goes with this Organian to talk with the others, while Spock stays in the planet to learn a lot more using his tricorder. At the negotiations with the Organians, Kirk delivers his message in 3 major points.
But the Organians basically answered they run out of time and the Klingons get there while they are still in the planet. They disguise as merchants to meet the Klingons, and finally we got them there, Commander Core.
So I did read a little about John Colicos because I have to say that I really like this performance. Canadian actor with Greek roots, and he has a very long career. One of the things that I really liked about the way that he portrayed Core was that even though they seem to be like, a very aggressive, I would say, not like animal kind of race, but they are very, at least he is a very educated individual. And I have to say that the vocabulary that he used in some of the scenes were like, oh, well, would you listen at that? I even saw this interview that he gave back in the 90s.
His performance as Core is amazing, and being the first important Klingon in Star Trek, this becomes one of the most important characters in my opinion.
He knows his business, and he has this great intuition that makes him kind of prefer or have a stronger attention towards Kirk, because he cannot stand the other guy's smiles. So he's very honest, very straightforward. He's not messing around. He means when he says things, and at the same time he has this very refined way of communicating his ideas, and I really admire that. I have to say, it's one of the things that made me like performances such as William Campbell from the Esquire of Gothos and this Trelane character. I loved the performance. I hated the character. I've made that clear before, but I loved his performance. The same thing happened with Ricardo Montalban, that have this very regal and a very imponent stand once they are doing a performance. In this case, one of the things that strikes me comparing him to Khan is that Khan looks big. Okay, he looks tall and fit, and I don't know, you would not want to mess around. And in the case of John Colicos, he really doesn't look like big or menacing, but only by the expressions in his face you will go like, okay, this is a guy I don't want to mess around with either.
So let's go back to the episode. Kirk and Spock and the Organians finally meet Core. They introduce themselves as merchants, but Kirk's rebellious personality catches Core's eye immediately. Makes it clear that he dislikes the Organians because they smile too much, and he feels a little more identified with Kirk, so he takes him to his office while Spock is being debriefed by some sort of lie detector that is really strong. In his office, he delegates the responsibility of maintaining order in Organia to Kirk, who immediately refuses. Spock is brought back after passing the lie detector test. They're set free, and they get better acquainted with Klingon hospitality. Kirk decides to stir things up to prove the Organians the danger they're facing up. So they sneak in a Klingon warehouse, attack a Klingon guard from the back, and drag him off camera. They throw a sonic grenade in the first open box they could find around, and kaboom! Kirk openly admits the bombing, but the Organians are not amused at all. They keep saying this, you don't understand this thing, like they don't actually need them. While still trying to reason with the Organians, the Klingons interrupt this conversation. Out of the blue, this guy tells them who he actually is. The Klingon gets all giddy because he finally has a member of the Federation in his hands. Not only that, but he also tells them that they want to destroy each other. So he just blew everything up. Kirk is taken again to his office, and now he has an ultimatum. He has to let them know where his Starfleet is, or he will die. Of course, Kirk refuses, and he's thrown in jail along with Spock. They need to get out of prison, and they start planning their escape, but then suddenly they hear a noise, they get ready to attack, and it's the Organian that comes and takes them out of prison like nothing's nothing. Core uses some sort of communicator and announces that he's just killed 200 Organians, and he will continue doing so until Spock and Kirk appear. They decide to attack Core and they sneak in at night into his headquarters. They finally get into his office and get him arrested. They start escorting him out, and as they are coming out of his office, the other Klingons surround them and they're about to shoot, but in that moment all of their weapons become ultra hot and they have to drop them. In that moment, the organians appear and announce themselves as the one interrupting this quarrel. They also inform them that anything that can cause violence, like weapons or ships, are inoperative. Kirk starts defending the Federation's rights to make war, as well as Core defends the Empire's rights to make war. And the Organians ask them if what they want is to continue killing millions of innocent people. Lost for words, Kirk accepts their demand, and then he learns that the Organians are actually species that have evolved beyond the physical needs. They decided to just stop this war, and they disappear in this amazing flash of light.
What I didn't kind of appreciate were the other characters that I know that they are given this personality, like a passive, non-aggressive personality, but it gets you to the point where it gets annoying, and then you realize they did have a point. I love the fact that in some other episodes, Kirk would have the ability to have an argument against the computer named Landru, win the argument, and then destroy a culture that had been existing for 6,000 years. And here, he couldn't have the argument, and he actually had to stay quiet. This episode had many recurrent themes that I had seen from other previous episodes. For example, the idea of a culture that has not yet evolved the same way that we have, like in the case of Miri, or the return of the Archons. Also, the idea of encountering a race that are just focused on war and conquering. The idea of a race that is way too evolved and that is not willing to allow any kind of violence in their turf. The episode also had unique points that I had never seen before, like Kirk losing the argument, or the seriousness with which Kirk delegated the responsibility to Sulu. That even though we have Klingons that are specialized in war and humans that are not afraid of war, and that Kirk at some point defined ourselves as killers, in this case, they don't get those abilities to work, but it's more like a battle of wits. And one of the things that we also got a lot of action, like the explosion or this fight that they have between the two warring ships. And once again, we missed a lot of great characters like Dr. McCoy or Scotty. This episode seems to be very well written because at the end, all the points make sense. For example, why are these people living in ruins? Or why these people doesn't seem to be interested at all about Kirk's and Spock's arrival. They try to tell Kirk that he was not understanding, and in fact he wasn't understanding, and even though they try to make him see, the signs were there all the time. We got to see once again Spock's super powerful mind. He has such a disciplined mind that he was able to just, lie and be undetected by this kind of lie detector that they had. So yeah, it was kind of fun to see that. So thank you again for joining me on this episode. I am super sorry that I couldn't do the reaction video like I was supposed to. I will just have to use my camera like I'm using it right now for all my coming reaction videos. Don't forget to like, to share, subscribe to my channel, please. And if you can become a Patreon, I will also appreciate that. I will leave the link to my Patreon page in the description box below. Thank you again. God bless, and bye-bye.